Hello again, Year 5 and Year 6, and welcome back to this week's Writing Learning Journey. Week beginning Monday the 25th of January 2021. This is the second video in the sequence of learning. If you missed yesterday's video, I do recommend that you go back and give it a watch. It does clearly explain this week's question and the outcome to you. It will just avoid you getting confused in this video. If you have time to do yesterday's writing tasks, if you missed those, then I also recommend you do have a go at those. But if you did miss them, it's not the end of the world. You can carry on with today's writing. Okay, so as usual, we're going to start with a reminder of our question and our gateway. Then we'll have a little bit of learning in the middle and a task at the end for you to complete at school or at home. So this week's question is, how does my description of Aaron Moore's storm create a picture in the imagination of the reader? And you'll remember yesterday we unpicked the question, we thought about what we know, and we identified our task. We'll look at that in a bit more detail in a moment. Now this task wheel is very similar to the science plan, do and review. We're going to be following the task wheel around this week to achieve our outcome and to answer this question. You'll remember that Aaron Moor is the location or the setting for the Stormkeeper's Island, which you're reading with Miss Hike in your reading lessons. This term's gateway is Explorers, and you'll remember we're focusing on two key questions. How have I shown determination and perseverance? How can I use reflection to make a decision when faced with a challenge? Now, some children are creating a learning journal this week, just as we do in school. So they'll be regularly pausing the video and updating their learning journal, while others will be focusing on completing or finishing the short written task each day. Okay, so we identified the outcome yesterday after unpicking the question. So by Friday, we will have written a description which creates a vivid or clear image in the reader's mind of a storm hitting Aaron Moore Island. We began to generate some ideas then. We had to look at a model or an example of what a good description might look like. And we identified that vocabulary is key and very important to a successful description and a successful picture in that reader's mind. And you'll be using the mind map that you generated yesterday to help you with today's task. Now I'd like you to pause the video here, Year 5 and Year 6, and just read through that model again. And you'll be thinking to yourself, okay, what else? What else? Not just the vocabulary, what else makes this description successful? Okay, pause the video now then, take a few minutes to read through, and then come back when you are ready. Welcome back, Year 5 and Year 6. Hopefully you have an idea now, something different to vocabulary that makes this description successful. Okay, now the one that I've been focusing on today, and we're going to focus on together now, is imagery or creative writing. And what that means, put sort of simply, is the picture. What your reader is seeing in their mind, what your reader pictures as they read. Now, all of the imagery and the writing, the vocabulary, your sentence structure, the words you choose, everything that you create as an author will create a picture. Okay, now one example of this that we looked at yesterday, the guardians of the forest had twisted and knotted their ancient branches together, welcoming in victims through an archway. Now, this instantly creates some imagery or a picture in your mind. So the guardians of the forest, we said yesterday, were the trees. Now, what is a guardian? So the author chose the word guardian for a reason. What is a guardian? Well remembered, it's a protector. It keeps something safe. Okay. Twisted and knotted. So that's a real clear image there. The guardians had twisted and knotted their ancient branches together. Now if you've twisted and knotted something together, that increases its safety factor, doesn't it? It makes it feel a lot more safer, a lot tighter. Maybe it's quite narrow. It's narrow, it's tight. You'd have to squeeze through. Squeeze through the forest. Doesn't sound like it would be easy to walk through. And again, the vocabulary that's been chosen is creating that imagery. Ancient branches. Now, what does ancient mean? Absolutely, it means that it's incredibly old. It's been there for a long time. The author chose not to use the word old, however. Instead, they chose ancient. It's far more interesting. It's been around a long time. Perhaps it's got lots of history. We often possibly associate it with being magical, or there being some sort of element of magical history to it. Now, my favourite part, welcoming victims. Now, a victim suggests danger, like something bad is going to happen. But yet we've got the fact that it's safe up here. So who is this forest safe for? There's definitely going to be some danger or a victim. And then an archway, that helps us yesterday, didn't it, to picture the shape of the trees and their branches. Now, you might be picturing year 5 and 6 something that looks a little bit like this. And you've pictured that image, that imagery in your head, thanks to the vocabulary and the way that this sentence has been put together or structured. So the author deliberately chose not to use the word trees, but instead let you work that out just through this word here, branches. There's no mention of leaves, is there, or anything else, just branches. And the author would have done that deliberately. So as you generate your ideas today, you're going to have to be thinking really carefully about every single word you use and why. And what imagery or picture is that going to create in your reader's head? I know you've done a lot of work on that with Miss Hike as well. Now we're writing about a storm. I'm going to bring down our question with us. So remember, we are writing about a storm, a sea storm on Arranmore Island. And one of the things you focused on yesterday with your mind map were the sea and waves. So we're going to have a go together, year 5 and year 6, as best we can. I know we're not together. Hopefully we can work together. You can use your mind map at home. I can use my mind map that I've got at home here with me to write a few sentences using imagery to create an image of the waves. And I've got a picture in mind here just to help us. Okay, you'll notice we've got a dark, ominous sky, so a sky that's giving me a little bit of a bad feeling overhead. And then we've got the waves that look like they're beginning to surge and crash. And there's something hidden in the waves. I wonder if you can spot that, year 5 and year 6. Can you spot the animal in there? Hopefully you can see that just in the foam of the wave, we call the white part the foam, you can hopefully see a horse. Now, why do you think the sea and waves are often described as a horse? Well, if we think about the sounds, the crashing, the booming, the thundering of waves, that can often sound like horses' hooves. And the white white foam that we see as the wave breaks, some people think that that looks like the horse's mane or the hair on the horse's head. So I'm going to use that imagery to help me today with my writing. And remember, I'm using my senses, so I've thought about how the sea sounds. I've thought about what I can see. I might think about the salty smell, maybe the bitter taste. Salt tastes quite bitter. Okay, now I'm going to start with the sound. And I quite like booming, actually. I don't want to use crashing. I think that's a little bit too predictable. And so I want to save thundering for the sky, actually. So the booming sounds of, I'm going to say hundreds of horses. I want this to be loud and dramatic. Hundreds of horses thundering across. Now I'm writing about the island. The booming sounds of hundreds of horses thundering across the island echoed along the beach. Sand? What do we call that part of the beach where the wave just crashes onto it? Shore, that's right, the shoreline. The booming sounds of hundreds of horses thundering across the island echoed along the shoreline. I'm going to talk about, so I've talked about the horse's hooves now. I didn't have to say horse's hooves, just talked about them thundering. Okay, I'm going to describe the waves now. Because this is a storm, the waves are going to be ferocious. The ferocious, and I'm not going to use the word waves, I'm going to say white foam. The ferocious white foam of, I'm going to say their manes, because I've already said horses. My reader will know who I'm talking about. The ferocious white foam of their manes surged, that means pushed forward, crashing, we use that onomatopoeia again, crashing onto the merciless, I'm going to borrow that from the model text, merciless sandbanks. Okay, so I've said what I can hear. I've said what I can see of the waves, that they're surging and crashing and the white foam is ferocious. Oh, do I want to say something now about the salty smell and the bitter taste? I could talk about the wind. There's quite a lot I could go on to talk about, actually, isn't there? The booming sounds of hundreds of horses thundering across the island echoed along the shoreline. The ferocious white foam of their manes surged, crashing onto the merciless sandbanks. I'm going to talk about, bitter, salty air. I'm going to borrow this bit from the model text. Whipped. I'm going to say the charge, actually, because horses charge. The charge brought with it, and I do need to check that I've used the right brought, so I'm going to underline that to check that in a moment. The charge brought with it the bitter sting. The bitter sting of salty. The charge brought with it the bitter sting of salty. Salty. What could I say, year 5 and 6? Any ideas? The charge brought with it the bitter sting of I'm going to say salty rage. This is a raging storm. Just check that makes sense by reading through it again. The booming sounds of hundreds of horses thundering across the island echoed along the shoreline. The ferocious white foam of their manes surged, crashing onto the merciless sandbanks. The charge brought with it the bitter sting of salty rage. Or salty tears, maybe? Salty tears, possibly. I'm not sure. I would have to think about that a bit more, year 5 and 6. So again, I'm going to underline that with my pen to come back to. Okay, so your challenge then today is we're generating ideas about imagery. So how successful have I been there of creating an image of sea and waves? What do you think? What would you give me out of 10? Okay, let's have a look at another example then. Now in your mind map, again, one of the things you might have been thinking about was thunder and lightning. Now I'm going to try and, I've got an image in my mind that I'd like to try and describe. And I'd like you, year 5 and 6, to work with me. So use your mind map. Be thinking about what you could write about. Be thinking about what ideas you'd give me if we were in the classroom now. What would you have your hand up sharing? Okay, so I'm going to start with the clouds. When we're describing, it's really helpful to structure our writing. We either start with describing the sky first and then we work our way down in the picture, or we can start by describing what's at the bottom, number 1, and then working our way up to the sky. Now I quite like to start with at the top and work my way down, but you might decide to do something slightly different. But all good authors will have a structure to their writing. So in this picture, I'm going to start with the clouds. And now I'm not going to use the word clouds, I'm going to call them a blanket. Now how could I describe that blanket? Now thunder and lightning, it's angry. Let me jot these words up here. I'm sure you've already got these on your mind map. Angry. Angry, maybe it's raging, thundering. Again, you could have booming. So these clouds. Now, I don't want to use angry. I think that's a word I use quite a lot in my writing. So I'm going to say malicious. Okay, those clouds, they are malicious. Cloud leered at the raging sea below. That means it stared at it, it glared. The cloud is glaring down at the raging sea. It's watching and waiting to pounce. Now in that cloud I can see there's lightning, there's rain, it's surging, it's getting ready. A bit like Zeus maybe, actually, year 5. You were learning about the gods. Perhaps Zeus is waiting to pounce. Now, I know you were learning about subordinate clauses last week, so I'm going to challenge myself. Remember our gateway as explorers. I'm going to challenge myself to use the subordinate conjunction as at the start of this sentence. I've done the clouds, now I'm going to think about the air. And in a storm, the air is thick and heavy, and sometimes we can get a bit of a headache. So I'm going to say, as the air thickened, the clouds bulged. That means they got big. They were swelling up with their tears of fury. Again, I'm not using angry because that's a word I use quite a lot. Instead, I'm going to use fury. And the clouds rumbled ominously. So that's a sense of danger coming across the night sky. Okay, let's have a read through then, check it makes sense. A blanket of malicious cloud leered at the raging sea below, watching, waiting to pounce. As the air thickened, I would think to yourself, year 5 and 6, why did I put a comma there? As the air thickened, the clouds bulged with their tears of fury and rumbled ominously across the night sky. Okay, so in my sort of structure, I've done the cloud, now have an eye on the sky. You can picture those big, heavy clouds. You can picture and feel how heavy and hard it is to breathe. Okay, we know it's night time, so we're picturing a dark, angry sky. And then came the thunder, so I'm going to say suddenly. And I'm using a fronted adverbial there, so which piece of punctuation will I need to use next? Well remembered, a comma. Suddenly, out of nowhere, thunder came roaring like a lion. I'm going to use a simile there. I'm going to compare that thunder to a lion. Lions are king of the jungle, aren't they? We've got the word malice, we've got fury, we've got ominous. Let's keep that anger going. Roaring like a lion again and again. For a split second, again, I'm going to try and use some of my knowledge. We've been learning about conjunctions. I'm going to use for, that coordinating conjunction. For a split second, the sky was alight with electricity. That's what lightning is, electricity. Bringing with it the rage and full. Let me scroll down so you can just see everybody. Bringing with it, so that lightning is bringing the rage and full destruction of, I'm going to use Zeus's power. You know Zeus had a lightning bolt. Okay, let's read through. A blanket of malicious cloud, so unkind cloud, leered, stared at the raging sea below, waiting, watching to pounce. As the air thickened, well done to everybody who remembered that commas there, because I started with the subordinate clause. As the air thickened, the clouds bulged or got heavy with their tears of fury, that's the rain, isn't it? And rumbled ominously across the night sky. Suddenly, out of nowhere, thunder came roaring like a lion again and again. For a split second, the sky was alight with electricity, bringing with it the rage and full destruction of Zeus's power. Okay, do you think year 6 then, if you didn't have this picture, would you picture something like this? How would you rate my writing and why? Okay, let's move on to your task today then. Now, again, we're at the generating stage. We're still planning ideas and organising ideas. And your focus today is imagery or creative writing. Now, whether you're doing a learning journal or the tasks, the writing tasks, you have the same thing to do today. So you're going to pick 2 areas of the storm to describe. Then you're going to use your mind map and my examples to help you write a short description for each part of the storm. Don't forget to create a picture in your reader's mind. You'll need to use senses, imagery, alliteration, onomatopoeia, similes, all the great writing techniques that you know you can apply in this week's piece of writing. Okay, I'm going to do a ... there because there's lots that you know. Don't forget you can rewind, so you can go back to my examples if you need some help. And really generating lots of ideas at this point, year 5 and 6, is going to help you achieve your overall outcome and be able to answer this question. For those of you who need next step guidance, so your next steps then would be to review your writing. Now that means read your work out loud to yourself or let a family member or friend read your work. What does the reader picture? What do they hear? What do they feel? Have that conversation with your reader year 5 and 6 and then rate your work out of 10. 1 being, my writing really didn't actually make a very good picture in my reader's mind. In the middle here, 5, 6 being, Yeah, it created a reasonable picture, but I know there's room for improvement. And 10, it created a picture exactly of what I imagined. No room for improvement. Rate your piece of writing and then think about how you will improve your description for tomorrow. So year 5 and 6, Mrs. PA, we can't wait to see your ideas about how you're going to describe your parts of the storm. Please don't forget to share your writing on Class Dojo with us. That way we can offer any help or support that you need. Have a lovely day everybody, and I'll be back tomorrow with your next video.